just because people, they jump right in. They get into it and they go for it and they end up learning the things that push the quality of their product forward. I think that's important for mead makers to adopt and to embrace, because it's so critical to the potential for the quality of your beverage. It expands your knowledge of the fruit and of the whole nature of quality, and it pushes you to gain that relationship with the beverage that's really firsthand and burned into your soul. It's getting it. It's reducing the amount of space between you and true quality, and it's also investing yourself in the actual production of the beverage, and that's, to me, for wine people, that is winemaking. That there isn't any separation between being a great vineyard person and knowing all that you possibly can about how to grow great grapes and making great wine. There's no difference. There's no separation. And for us in beer and in mead, there seems to be some of that, and it's a separation that I think doesn't. Well, it's a separation.
Doesn't do the trade justice?
Well, no, it's a separation we need to overcome. It's just a piece of distance that we need to continually work to minimize.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, it's part of that's a function of so many people living in urban areas and not having the capability to do that. But that doesn't mean that you can't go, find a local farm and volunteer to help them harvest, or even pick your own fruit. It's getting a little bit closer to it.
Yeah, it's also though, it's a matter of a decision. I mean, if you're a renter, I completely understand it. If you're a renter and you don't have access to property, then yeah, it's going to be really, really hard for you to grow some whatever. But if you own a piece of property and you can dedicate a piece of your property that is 20 by 20, you can grow enough fruit to make a batch of mead. It could be blackberries. It could be raspberries. There's just in every part of the country there is some crop that you can grow on one 20 by 20 piece of property. That could be cherries. It could be apples. It could be whatever.
Red currants.
There you go.
They're awesome.
If you grow a 20 by 20 section of your property with 5 or 6 red currant plants on it that you will allow to get pretty big. You can certainly make at least 1 or 2 5-gallon batches every year that are gonna they're just gonna sing. You're gonna be able to put them in front of anybody and blow their doors off. So
are you saying that growing your own fruit is kind of like growing your own tomato, where you compare that homegrown tomato to a supermarket tomato, and there's just no comparison of how much better that homegrown tomato is? Is that kind of the same thing that happens with fruit?
Well, you can buy. I mean, you can, especially when it comes to things like apples. You can't buy. Yes, I mean, when it comes to apples, the answer is yes. When it comes to apples, you can grow apples that you just cannot find in your local cider blend. And when you get down to it, yes, it will be that much better. It will be recognizably, discernibly better. Yes, the difference between the cookies that come out of your oven and that you scrape off the sheet, and the ones that you get in a package from the store. That grade of difference, yes. Now it's possible to buy really good cherries and really good raspberries that are, blackberries that are frozen fruit. It is possible, and it's possible to buy good, frozen red currants and frozen black currants, although they are really, really expensive.
Yeah. Not to mention hard to find.
They are extremely hard to find. But yeah, you can buy them, and you can make really good mead from them. And we're buying fruit at Schramm's to make mead with that we're really pleased with. But by the same token, if you compare the difference between the statement and the statement reserve, yeah, one of them is more expensive for a reason.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, look at the Heart. Heart of Darkness is, there's a reason why it's, so popular, why people love it so much. It's very obvious that, like you say, you mollycoddle the fruit. And in my mind's eye, I see you guys carrying each individual cherry, like in your two little hands. Don't drop it; it might get bruised.
Well, you can pick exactly when you want to.
Yeah.
Meaning, you can wait until the tree is you can pick 3 times if you need to get every piece of fruit at perfect ripeness, and that doesn't happen when you buy commercial fruit.
No.
And the same thing is true with the processing. When we pit the cherries for the statement reserve, all of the juice from that pitting goes right back into the product. It doesn't get run off into a concentrator and sold in jars to people at the grocery store. It's everything from those cherries goes into the statement reserve. And so you get all of that deliciousness, and you can't rely on that when you're buying commercial IQF fruit.
Yeah, very true.
You can also straight pack. I mean, if you've got a freeze fruit, and this is something you can look for when you're buying fruit as well. If straight pack fruit is delicious for a reason, when it's used in mead making, and the reason is that straight pack fruit is dumped into a container in bulk and then frozen, and the entirety of the surface area that is exposed to the freezer burn, if you will, is what's on the top of the fruit. If you put them in, as most straight pack fruit is packed, if you put it into an oxygen barrier plastic bucket, the surface of that fruit will end up with exposure to air, and the rest of the fruit will not. Whereas IQF fruit is frozen individually, and so the entire fruit is a source of exposure to air, and it will continue to change and, in my estimation, deteriorate slightly as it's stored. IQF fruit or straight pack fruit does not. Almost all of the fruit is sequestered away from oxygen exposure, and as a result, maintains more of its fresh, delicious flavor.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, freezing does not stop the degradation process. It just slows it way down,
Right.
But it's still there.
Right.
That doesn't change anything. We have a lot of questions people have been sending in. And, they hear you're coming on, and we get inundated. So,
shall I start with some of those?
Yeah, let's get into some of those, because I know they're all sitting there going, "Where's my questions?" So.
Okay. Scott Barron's had a whole bunch of questions. Let's start with. He says he has never heard Ken's views on fruit maceration pre-fermentation. What fruits are best used in primary versus secondary? So I guess that's probably 2 separate questions.
Yeah, maceration is something that, in the classic sense of cold maceration that's done with, for example, Beaujolais, and when maceration is done with the Gamay grapes that go into Beaujolais, that's not something that we do in our production process, and I'm not going to issue an opinion on that. There are some cold macerated Beaujolais that I like a lot, and there are some other non-cold macerated Beaujolais that I like a lot. I tend to feel like it's a manipulation that some people use that we shy away from. We shy away from it. We do, if we're using frozen fruit, there can be some maceration that occurs as the fruit goes from being frozen to being thawed, and you could call that a maceration process, but I don't think it's truly a maceration in the sense of taking and blanketing crushed or non-crushed fruit and allowing it to break down. I think there is some maceration that occurs in straight pack cherries, for example, and straight pack berries when they are in the process of freezing, and I think that's actually positive. That's just an example of when weight and pressure and freezing will break down the skins and whatnot of various fruits, and that I think is positive. On the question of primary versus secondary, I don't think there is no absolute best answer to this question. A lot of it for me depends on at this point our production process, which dictates that we want to use the fruit in the primary, extract the flavor from it, and then get the fruit off of the spent fruit. Get the mead off of the spent fruit and allow the clarification process to begin as quickly as possible. That's why we're not using fruit in secondary. We want to extract and start clarification, and if we're not going to fine or filter, then that process is begun as early as it can and gives us as much time as we can in the secondary and the tertiary aging vessels to let that mead just clarify on its own. So it's as much a factor of that kind of predictability and sort of it's not acceleration of, but not delaying of the production process that's important to us. If you've only got, this is where home mead makers have way more flexibility than commercial people do. Commercial people need to get things going and get it in the bottle, and it has to get sold, and otherwise it's just, it's inventory that's, it's capital assets that are tied up that you're getting nothing out of. Whereas if you're just a home mead maker, you have the luxury, to us, from our perspective, of being able to make that decision and use, for example, a little bit less fruit and get a lot more impact out of it if you're adding it in the secondary. It's going to take you more time, and when you add that additional fruit in, you're going to get additional fermentation that's going to occur, and then you're going to have to separate the fruit out, again, whether that's pulling it out, even pulling it out in a bag, or using some form of straining system to get it out of the mead. Then you're where we want to be at the end of primary fermentation. So that and that's that's great if you've got the time on your hands to be able to coddle that mead the way you want to coddle it, then great. You can certainly get a lot more fruit impact if you use it later in the fermentation process. So it's not a matter of which one's better or worse. It's not a matter of a right or wrong thing. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to try and squeeze as much flavor and maybe get a little more aromatics out of it at the end, or in our instance, we're using just a ton of fruit. We use what most people would consider obscene quantities of fruit to make stuff like Black Agnes and raspberry and cherry and the statement, because we know we want that